Takk, Claudia. Da skal jeg bare prøve å dele skjermen min. Sånn. Der. Der. Kommer den opp? Yes. Ok. Så jeg heter Linn Normann. Jeg skal presentere her i dag med Kimble og Ivana. Vi er veldig glade for å få presentere her i dag. From now on, though, I am going to be speaking in English, as several of the people in our group don't speak Norwegian. I'm very glad to present two of our graduate students, Kimble and Ivana, who will also be presenting. What we had planned to do today was to break our presentation into two parts. So I'll be speaking a little bit about the background of our project, what it's about, how it came about, and a little bit about how we've disseminated the project more broadly into the community. While Kimble and Ivana will be talking a little bit about the didactics and the classroom activities that we've been doing for this project and some of the pedagogical implications or visions and observations that we've done as part of the project. So just very briefly on part one, we call it Our Migration History. It is about documenting immigrant lived experiences using an inclusive participatory approach. And so what we mean by that is that there are two aims, two missions to the project. The first is about enhancing minority perspectives, so to voice the realities faced by immigrant communities in Norway. That's the empirical mission, is to document these. But then we also have a second part, which is about inclusive participatory research. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the model, but this is just to show that what we're trying to do is include high school students in the research project and have them trained by undergraduates and graduate students using techniques of mentorship and peer review, and also doing training, NSD training, and just general training about what it means to do research and what we can do with research. So I'll talk a little bit about how we integrate the students in the project later. But I just want to tell a little bit about the background of how this project came about. We were involved in a project called Documenting the Undocumented at UC Davis and UC Berkeley. Two important parts of that project were that they came out of the ethnic studies department. So ethnic studies traditionally focus on minority research, but we've also been using and learned from them this technique of inclusive participatory research, which is integral to the project. So when our group started looking at comparative narratives to the US and Norway, we found out about a project that was run through the Museum of Stavanger at the time called Integration is a Must. This was back in 2018. It was run by the immigration curator, Hans Storhaug in Stavanger. And this was a project that involved including high school students to interview people of immigrant backgrounds and to take pictures with their interviewee about something that symbolized their experiences of immigration. So when Hans Storhaug retired from the museum, we took over the project and added a research component to it through the University of Stavanger. I was able to get some funding to hire on some undergraduates and graduate assistants to work on the project. Many of them have immigrant backgrounds themselves, so that kind of enriched the project altogether. We got an NSD approval, and we've been working with high school students in this project since. So that's a little bit about the background. As far as immigration in Norway, just to kind of put it into context, most of you are probably familiar with the fact that immigration has increased over the years. But I think what's interesting is also in a study we did, Norwegian textbooks have also reflected this immigration. So on the right here, you see a graph in a paper that was recently published by us on the idea that also textbooks have increasingly focused on the topic of immigration, refugee, and asylum seekers over time. We now have almost 1 in 3 schools or elever students in Oslo that have an immigrant background as well. So it is really influencing the school environment as well. And in this slide, you see the same point, but just showing the visual images of textbooks in Norway over time, how the representation of the immigrant other has changed over time. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the article. It's just to give a context, which I think is very important, which is despite this so-called new Norwegian we, research shows that students from immigrant backgrounds in Norway express emotions of social exclusion, discrimination, unworthiness, and lower teacher expectations. That's a study that recently came out from NTNU. But we also have our own in-house study at UES, which showed that teachers also report feeling ill-prepared for teaching in the multicultural classroom. And so with that context in mind, we set up a project. So this is our timeline. I've showed it before, I think a while back when we did a short introduction of our project. This timeline just shows how we originally intended to include students. So with our kickoff event, we invited 180 high school students to our university in Stavanger. And we had our keynote speaker, Ali Durrani, who I'll mention in a little bit. The idea was to create an event around what was going to be 4 months of research experience. So the students were going to receive in-class training, which they did. We were going to develop the survey with them. They were going to be a part of the data collection and the data analysis. And then we were going to have a launch of a website as well as an exhibition at the Museum of Stavanger. The idea being that students would be involved in every part of the research stage at various levels from high school up to graduate student and faculty. COVID-19 hit the day we had finished our workshops, and the students were going out with their recorders to do interviews. So we had to think radically different. There was a while where we thought we might have to close down the project, but instead, with the persistence of the group, we decided to put everything online. It did change the original plan, but what we've done now is created an online survey based on some of the framings and the questions that we developed in class, which is now available on our website, as well as launched a fotokonkurranse, a photo call, which will encourage people to share their photos with us so that we can still do the digital recordings, but not in the way we had originally planned. Right at the end, I want to talk a little bit about what has been also trying to enforce the links between the research and what we do with the community. And with the work of Ali Durrani, who was Stavanger's fribyforfatter, his story will be attached in a video that you can see, a digital video that he's made himself. But his work has been important for our project. He not only was the keynote speaker, but he's been involved in the in-class workshops, and he's designing and doing a lot of the work for the project itself. He was a detainee. He was spent 4 years on Manus Island, so he shares a lot of his experiences, which you can see in the following video. I'm not going to play it, but I know Claudia is going to upload the PowerPoint, so you can have a look at his very powerful story. And I also share another slide with the photo op that we did as part of the project as well, that we share with the students at kickoff, so they get an idea of what type of photos we're looking at. So really, this is just to kind of show some of the other end of how we try and share that research with the community and have the students be a part of that. I'm going to leave the virtual floor to Kimble, so that she can share a little bit about what we did in the classrooms.
Hi. So earlier this year, we as a group attended 2 high schools in Rogaland, and on the next slide you'll see that the demographics from these 2 schools. So the lesson plan we devised was based on the assumption that the high school learners would in actual fact be conducting an interview with a person from an immigrant background. And this is what Linn has just explained was part of the initial plan. So the lesson plan we devised was comprised of an icebreaker activity followed by a word association prompt, and both of these were to introduce the theme of migration and the reasons for it, such as push and pull factors. Next, we had a discussion about interview techniques, which fed into a photo storytelling activity. And then when we wrapped up the entire session by addressing the ethics involved and the legal stipulations required from Innledere, and then we had a Q&A at the end. So we launched the session with the following hypothetical question. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would you like to live and why? And money was not an issue, of course. So each individual learner responded in class to the entire class, and we wrote their answers on the board. And then we looked for common themes, and there were obviously those such as education and culture and even warm weather. So we are in Norway, of course. So we launched the session with this question, and it worked really well. The students were engaged, and it allowed them to think about the need or motivation for mobility from a personal point of view before subsequent activities would require them to think about migration from a global or other perspective. So following on from this, we had the word association activity. What word do you associate with the term migrant or migration? And here, each student was given post-it notes, and they were to think about it individually first and then in their small groups. And then they came up and placed all their post-it notes on the whiteboard, as you can see here. At this point, we introduced the idea of the migration butterfly, which is a framework developed within the group to discuss to shift the perspectives, if you like, on migration. So instead of just looking at the difficulties or challenges typically associated with migration, we want to shift the focus to one where we're looking at more positive aspects, the contributions, in fact, that migration and migrants bring to a country. So next we watched a video, which was of a qualitative interview, and we asked the students to think critically about what was good and bad in this interview. And this was a how not to do it interview, in fact. So their observations were then discussed in plenum and either confirmed or elaborated upon by the presenter, which was Ivana. So having activated and hopefully enriched the learner's knowledge about migration and awareness about interview techniques, we then went on to the photo storytelling activity. So each group was given one of these 5 photographs on an A3 sheet of paper. And then they were asked to tell us the story behind each photograph. So for instance, you know, who took it and where they took it and why they took it, what motivated them, and what did it perhaps even symbolize. They were then asked to write down some questions that they would ask the person that they were going to interview to find out more. After this, each group presented to the entire class the story they felt was behind this photograph, and then Linn presented the actual background story to each photograph. So this activity developed curiosity. It also helped the students consider what questions they could ask, open or closed, and how this could be related to the actual interview that they would undertake. They would be, in the interview setting, they were going to be provided with an interview guide. So therefore, a list of 15 questions, 10 questions that would help them facilitate the interview. But of course, they would need to be able to respond spontaneously and thoughtfully within that interview setting. Finally, we looked at research ethics. And here we talked about personvern, so the protection of personal information, and we clarified terms and their differences, such as confidentiality versus anonymity. We also broached the subject of the third person problematic. So not only was our goal here simply to introduce research within or ethics within research, but also ethics that were particular to an interview situation, as well as try and help the learners become aware of the sensitivity that they would require in order to interview someone from a migrant background. So we intended and we hoped that our learners would be more reflective and enact an ethical approach when conducting their interviews. And then we just had a little Q&A at the end, in case there were lots of questions, obviously, about what they would be doing. So now Ivana will present some of our observations.
Thank you, Linn and Kimble. I will particularly focus on the word associations activity, which we conducted in the classroom workshops, as well as on our observations regarding the word clusters that emerged as a result of that activity. As Kimble previously mentioned, the students were asked to write words associated with the topic of migration, having been given a bit of time, of course, before to think and brainstorm what actually associates them with that term. They were also asked to consider where they could place their words in groups, which resulted in the creation of word clusters. That gave another level of association to the words being placed in a group. We could see some of the words which emerged in the clusters in different classes in both schools, and they were similar as well as unique. If we go in and look into school A, where a large proportion of students have immigrant background, the most prominent words which appeared among the word clusters that associated students with migration were job, family, war, flight, love, education, and travel, as well as many more. While in school B, where large proportion of students have non-immigrant backgrounds, words that were encountered included job, refugee, war, culture, possibility, as well as politics. Now, when we comparatively observe the word clusters in both schools, we could see a lot of similarities as well as differences. Observing word clusters, some of the similarities among the clusters include the words refugee, job, war, prejudice, as well as racism, segregations, and others, which we can see also in the first column. These were words that emerged in both schools among the word clusters. Nevertheless, there are some words that were quite unique, and not only on school level, but also on class level. And they have been encountered only a few times or even once. In school A, we can have the first word in the column is baba, meaning father in several languages. This word, as well as the word loss, which you can find last, this word bring out this minority perspective, and they're closely related and tied to people and emotions, as well as lived experiences. And although segregation and racism as words appeared in both schools, what was particularly interesting and unique here that appeared was the word assimilation. And in school B, we can see many words related to politics and rights, as well as an interesting word, which is kebab norsk, kebab Norwegian. What was particularly also interested in this school is that in the class that was giving homework by the teacher to explore and to investigate the events as given by the media on the border between Greece and Turkey, the two words that emerged were Greece, Italy, Turkey, as well as a boat trip. So what would be interesting to further observe from this is how actually a lived immigrant experience impacts student perspective of migration, and not only lived experience, but also a prior knowledge as well as educational background. And this would be interesting to observe even in a more expanded context, not only in Rogaland. These activities, including the word associations as well as the picture interpretation, could be very interesting to involve in the classroom when discussing different themes and topics, not only migration, for example, as it engages the students and includes their experiences, perceptions, and perspective.
Thank you, Ivana. And just at the end, we wanted to thank you all for listening and for having the opportunity to present, but also to give our contact information and share our website with you, and just acknowledge some of the partners we have at the University of Stavanger. We have 2 programområder. This is a Zoom photo of some of the members on the team when we were working together. And of course, the partnerships we have with Dembra and the Museum of Stavanger and the Peter Satter Foundation in UC Berkeley. So we put some pointers out for the breakout room. Of course, these are just ideas, But we would love to hear from you, maybe some reflections on the differences in the classroom observations between schools, and between the two schools we showed, maybe the possibilities of how you could implement this in your own teaching, or thoughts and suggestions for how this could be done across Norway, and some ideas for future collaborations. So with that, thank you very much, and we'll leave it to you, Claudia.
Thanks a lot to the three of you. I have now started to assign the breakout groups, and I have done it a little bit differently than the previous times. I have only created 3 breakout groups, which are a little bit larger than the previous times, but in each of the groups there's one of the presenters. So I think, as this was such a rich presentation and such an interesting project, there will also be an opportunity in the breakout rooms to ask some more questions to the presenters. So everybody shall have the possibility to be together with one of the presenters in the breakout rooms. So I'll send you there now for 20 minutes. And then we'll be back here, a 1:45.
Nice to see you.